Today's Q&A, we've got questions about drip irrigation, adding value to current restaurant customers, packaging for restaurants. We're gonna look at some drip irrigation, that and more. That's coming up next on The Urban Farmer. First question is from Dave Owen asking about, would like to see a video on whether you have an easy method for laying out your drip irrigation after seeding. I'm moving to a half-acre plot soon. I'd like to get it good from the get-go. Okay, so I'll cut to a video about that question specifically. I'll show you how I do it, but I just wanted to say a couple things about drip first. There's pros and cons to drip. The pros, off the top of my head, are it's uses less water in a way because it puts it where you need it. Actually, I would say that's probably the only pro about drip. Oh, and the other one is you don't get wind, so it's not affected by wind. That's good, and you don't get splash up on the crop. So there's three things off the top of my head that I think are really good about drip. The things that I don't like about drip is it's a lot more expensive. I've priced out that it's about 2.5 times the cost to set up something on drip than it would be overhead. You have to filter the water, so you need to have, if you're rural, you need to have a lot more filtrations than you would in the city. And the biggest problem about drip, well, there's two other things actually. First, the other thing is you have to move it every time you turn over the beds, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But that's added labor there. And the thing that I find is the worst about drip is with direct seeded crops. If you're planting just row crops, like say you've got a row crop next to that drip, that's something else. But when it comes to biointensive beds, like the way I do it, Jean Martin or a number of people that are farming in 30-inch beds, then the best I've seen is to use 4 rows of drip on a 30-inch bed. Depending on your soil, you can maybe get away with 3. If you're doing just transplanted crops, maybe you can do 2, or with tomatoes you can do 1. But generally, if you're going to have direct seeded crops, you need to have 4. And the biggest problem is when you first seed your crops, so say you're direct seeding a lettuce or direct seeding a radishes or any kind of loose leaf greens, you don't get the best germination if you're just relying on the drip alone. What I have to do is I hand water the beds for about a week at night, just to get a nice spread on the beds. They germinate well and the drip can take over, and then it's more or less okay. Except in the case of carrots, I find drip is really annoying because you get too much water underneath, not enough on top. You get this crusty layer of soil on top that is hard for carrot. Like some seeds that didn't germinate right away, they won't germinate at all. So I find you don't get as good of a germination, and then you get this soil that looks dry on top, but it's really wet underneath. And when it comes time to harvesting the carrots, it's kind of a hassle. So I don't think. I think the jury is out on drip. I mean, it really depends on your context. The challenge that I have with drip, with my direct seeded crops, is that I'm in a high desert climate. I'm in a hot and dry climate similar to Arizona, but we don't have we have cooler winters, obviously. Unless you're higher in the mountains, then it's actually quite similar. But so I don't like drip for that reason. But I still use it. I think it's great for tomatoes. It's great for anything that's under transplants or landscape fabric. I still use it, right? Like I use multiple types of irrigation. So I just wanted to say that as a precursor to this video. Okay, so the one I'm sitting in front of these are just T couplers. So they just screw on and off. They don't have on and off switches or on and off valves like the other ones, but the reason I like these ones is that I can unscrew the whole bed and remove all of it at once. So when I come along to plant a bed, in fact this was planted maybe just a week ago or around there, 10 days maybe, all I'll do is come in here and I'll just unscrew that, okay? And then I'll just do the same thing here, unscrew that, and then I can take this whole, you can get 2 guys, one on each end of the bed, and you just take the whole thing off and just plop it down somewhere, do your bed prep, and then put it back on and screw it in. That's really just how you'd have to do it. You can try to plant with the drip on there, but it just makes running your seeder awkward. So I prefer to take the whole thing off. Now the other one, these ones I used because so many YouTubers said, Curtis, why don't you use the on and off valves that poke into the main line? So I did. I tried it, and I find them more of a pain in the ass because I can't remove the entire header. I have to go, and if I'm going to prep this bed again, I got to go and take off each of these lines, take all the lines off, and move them in the same way. You got to move them off the bed, just like if you were, you know, you're going to do your bed prep, you got to take the lines off, right? So it's a hassle. It's a hassle. I mean, I like these on and off ones for the reason that they've got optionality. Like if I change, you know, here, for example, I had a double bed one time in the season, so I've got this one as an option. I can put a line in there if I want to do a double bed and kill that walkway temporarily. Or they're good in the sense that if you want to isolate an area and you're only going to plant a few beds on the plot, you can turn the other ones off. At the same time, you can do that with these drips. You just kink one line. Having used both, I think it's easier just to kink the line than to go and turn a bunch of the ones off. You know, yes, it looks cool to have the on and off. You know, the one thing about the on and off ones that is a hassle as well is putting them in. You got to go and prick in each one, and sometimes you make the hole too big, and then it starts squirting out water, and then you got to cut it and amend it and then do it again. So frankly, I still think the T-couplers are better. That's just my opinion. You know, that's in my context, that is what works best. So basically, Dave, all you got to do is pull pull the header off, pull the lines off, prep your beds, plant it, and then put the lines back on. Doesn't really matter if your lines go directly over a row. The crop's gonna go around the lines. That's what I've noticed. So it's not that big of a deal. Hope that answers your question. Okay, Drew Sample, my buddy Drew Sample has a question here about how to add more value to existing customers. So I guess he's asking, if you already have a group of restaurant customers and you're already selling, say, 3 different products to them, how do you start introducing more products to them? And I would say the easiest way to do that is just bring them samples of stuff. Say, hey, try this, check this out. Bring them free stuff all the time, and list it on your invoice so that they know that it was brought. Because sometimes you go into a restaurant and you might not be able to talk to the executive chef right away, but you might bring a box of stuff. Maybe most of that is what they ordered, and then you've got a few small bags of this or that. And you might want to list it on the invoice to say that it's a sample, so that if the executive chef is going through all the sous chef the executive sous chef is going through all of these invoices, they'll say, oh, so and so brought these samples. Okay, let's go check those samples out. I think that's the easiest way, is to bring samples. Having said that, I mean, what is also important is to just build the rapport. You build the relationship. You get to know those people, and you build a relationship to the point where you're at almost a conversational level. So when you come in, you're kind of shooting the breeze and talking about things, talking about what you're doing on the farm. And it takes time to get to that. You know, you can't get that right away. Some people are better at it than others. Some people are more natural at it. I think I'm a bit natural at getting to know people, at least not natural as in I read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. I would suggest everybody read that book. It's probably one of the greatest books ever written, and ever since I read that book about 8 years ago, it totally changed the game for me in my life. And a lot of those principles I've applied, all those principles I've applied to my business and the way I do business. So I don't think I'm going to take that back. I'm not a natural at this. I just learned when I was getting into business how to do these things. So it's building good rapport, getting people on a conversational level, and bringing them samples when you have stuff to show them. Next question is from Big I, and so some of these don't have names on them because I just kind of was like glancing through the comments and I kind of paraphrase some things. So this one is Big I or Big L maybe. How do you keep greens from wilting when on display at the market? That's a good question. As far as greens go, well, put them in sealed bags for one, and I say that like it sounds like common sense, but it's not, because I'm amazed at how many farmers I see that have these open-ended bags at the market. And I understand the reason for that is then people can see the greens, but they wilt, and the air will wilt them down. So put them in sealed bags. The second thing is the way you pack them is very important. I've talked about this in previous videos, but the best way to have greens keep long is wash them the day before they're packed. So they're washed, spun, and dried, and they sit in the cooler in somewhat aerated cooler. Like I've shown you guys in previous videos of how I drill holes, 2 holes in my totes, so that there's a little bit of airflow in there, but not a lot. And so we wash, spin, and dry our greens, then they sit in the cooler for at least 8 hours, and then they get packed cool. The problem is if you pack greens when they're warm, they go into a bag that's sealed, and then as they cool down, it releases condensation, and that will cause them to spoil quicker. So packing them cool and dry is really key. And the other thing is, if you're at the market for a long time and it's a hot day, then bring coolers. You know, just go to the hardware store or wherever and get big camping style coolers, put cooler packs in them, and pack your most delicate products to the market in those coolers, and then only display like 12 at a time. And then you can even, what I've done in the past too on really hot days, is you could take ice packs on the bottom of your display boxes and then put a table, like just like a cloth over top of it, so that the cooler is not touching the greens directly, and that will keep the display a bit cooler as well. So those are a few things that we do. Okay, next question is about packaging, so I'm going to show you what that is here. So regarding packaging for chefs, for the most part what we do is we just recycle wax boxes. So here's one example. We get these boxes from the grocery stores that we sell to, and we just reuse them. A lot of them are California certified organic produce boxes, and we reuse them. And most farmers in my area do that. So, you know, a restaurant, or you could have one restaurant order, like a small one, might be packed in a box like this, and then you might have bags on rolls. So we've got bags like this. You know, you might have a 2-pound case lot of salad mix packed in there. For the most part, that's what we do. Things like tomatoes, when we deliver tomatoes to restaurants, I do a 15-pound flat like this. Again, these are recycled cardboard boxes that we get from the back of grocery stores. We only use the ones that are from certified organic produce, because then we know that there's no chemicals or anything like that in it. So we reuse those. And for like big orders where, say, a customer is ordering a big, like 10 pounds of salad mix or more, we just use these bag liners. They're almost just like it's like a garbage bag, and you can get them anywhere, just like a clear garbage bag essentially. You can get food grade ones specific too, and you know, you can find those anywhere. Just go on and Google. But we would pack, like, say we would put 10 pounds of greens in a bag like that, and then put it in this box and then label it. So that's essentially how we're packing stuff for restaurants, is we're just using bigger bag units than we would use at the farmer's market. So I hope that helps. Okay, next question is from Dion, and she asks, I was wondering if the tarping process ever results in anaerobic soil conditions. Well, the reason I took this question is because I'm just going to tell you what my experience is. I'm not a soil scientist. In fact, I know very little about soil science, and frankly, I don't really care. I look at what's there and I go with my gut. I go with what I'm observing from nature, what all the microbes are doing scientifically. That doesn't really interest me. I'm glad that there are people out there like Elaine Ingram who do that kind of stuff, because I think it's cool to check it out here and there, but it's not my thing. But having said that, does tarping result in anaerobic conditions? It does and it doesn't in my experience. So what I've noticed is when I pull a tarp off, so say I have a bunch of crop residue, like it was a bunch of greens beds that had been cut multiple times, and in the fall I don't really feel like pulling them out. I just tarp it and I leave those tarps on for the fall. What happens is there is an anaerobic breakdown that occurs. So all that stuff breaks down anaerobically. It kind of turns into a sludge and it just kind of sits on the top of the soil. And I know that because when I pull the tarp off, I see this broken down residue that's totally that's very, very unrecognizable from what it was. I think that's anaerobic because it's a sludge. I know what the difference between anaerobic and aerobic is. An anaerobic breakdown is when you have stuff breaking down without oxygen, and it's sort of in a confined environment, so that can be not healthy in some regards. I understand that. And aerobic is more like good composting methods, right amounts of carbon and nitrogen, where you've got oxygen and heat breaking it down, and the microbes like that. So it's anaerobic in the sense that yes, it does break down to a sludge, but when you open it up and you prepare those beds again, there's oxygen and sunlight, which is the greatest disinfectant available, and in my experience I've never seen that result in negative anaerobic experiences. I understand from what I see that the breakdown is anaerobic when I'm tarping it, but when it's uncovered it's no longer anaerobic. And as far as the way we use landscape fabric, you could ask, well, Curtis, what about anaerobic soil conditions on your landscape fabric? I haven't seen it because the landscape fabric breathes. It has air and water get through it. It doesn't allow sunlight through, but it does breathe, so I've never noticed any anaerobic conditions there, or especially anything that has been detrimental to our crops or the health of the crops. So I hope that answers your question, Dion. Last question is from Rogan. He's asking, what accounting software do you use? I use a program called Account Edge, and I don't like it that much. It works for what I need. All I use that program for is for accounting, or not accounting, but invoicing. I don't use it for anything else. I do everything else in spreadsheets. I'm working on an app, I've mentioned this before, that will kind of change that eventually, have it all in one place. The reason I haven't gone with a software like QuickBooks, which is what I would actually recommend, especially there's a new one, I think it's called QuickBooks Online, really simple and streamlined, it goes to a cloud. I like the idea of that. The reason I haven't changed is because I paid $600 for the program, and it more or less does what I need it to. But honestly I wouldn't recommend it. It's got some things that aren't very intuitive, and from what I've seen of QuickBooks, it is very intuitive. And if it was more important to me, I would just change over to QuickBooks. But it's not really that important to me at this time. How I do it in spreadsheets works for my context and for what I need it to. So that's all today's questions, guys. I hope you guys have found that useful. If you want to see more stuff like this, please hit the subscribe button right now. If you'd like to make a donation to the show, that's very much appreciated and always welcome. I use the money from the donations of the show to upgrade camera gear. It affords me to spend the time to do these. If you guys have noticed, I'm making one video a day, and the fact that you're donating to the show is helping me do that. So thank you so much for those of you that do. The YouTube revenue is pretty minor at this point. It's pretty much worth less than minimum wage for me, so it doesn't really do much. But again, I appreciate anybody that is supportive of the show. Such as buying my book or checking out my online course. My book is that you can buy at theurbanfarmer.co. If you're in Canada or in the US, I can ship it to you. You support me more by buying my book from me. I know it's not as cheap as Amazon, but you're supporting myself, the writer. And my online course has tons of this stuff in it, guys. I can't recommend it enough. For those of you who are very serious about getting into farming, this will take years off your learning curve, and you can check that out at profitableurbanfarming.com. Okay guys, thanks for watching.